Without further ado, Carey. Oh, there you go. Okay, now, do you want to start with some, well, why don't you start with your intro and background? And
Okay.
I know you have some slides that you might want to share with the audience.
Yeah, so just a little bit about my background. So I started in venture capital in 2004. I started my career at IVP, one of the oldest firms on Sand Hill Road that has invested in companies like Netflix, Twitter, Snapchat, and on and on and on. From there, I went to Intel Capital, where I was part of a small team that invested in primarily non-strategic investments. One of the issues that Intel had faced was they were missing companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, that were not strategic when they first started, but then later became strategic when they were worth tens of billions of dollars. So they wanted to have a non-strategic dedicated team to invest in, what we would probably call frontier at the time. And now, after Intel, I had the opportunity to leave with an ex-colleague at Intel Capital, try to go out, raise our own fund, and very, very inspired by Ishiguro-san yesterday, the founder of TDK, who failed, 98 times? So we went out, tried to raise a fund, met with 150 LPs, and we just failed. Our goal was to raise $100 million, we raised 11, and we said, fundraising sucks. And we're gonna stop the insanity, and we just wanna get back into our regular jobs. So that was the failing. At the moment that I decided I wanted to quit fundraising, just wanted to get back to a regular VC job. I was introduced through a really good friend of mine at DCM, Panasonic. And I was like, not really interested in doing venture capital, 100-year-old Japanese, traditional Japanese company. In Silicon Valley, I only knew 2 Japanese VCs. I'm not ethnically Japanese, I don't speak Japanese. I don't have an uncle on the board of Panasonic. So I was hesitant, but that meeting went really well. They said, look, there's a second slide here, if you could switch. So the history of Panasonic Ventures is that from 1998 to 2015, Panasonic Ventures was your typical standard 1.0 VC firm, corporate VC. What they did was they needed a business unit engagement to invest in a company. And over that time, they invested, call it just over $70 million. They got back roughly $70 million, and they had very little strategic return. And around 2015, they said, we're gonna stop the insanity, this is not working, and we're just gonna stop. And there was an individual in Panasonic that said, hey, if we're gonna start this again, if we're gonna do VC, we're gonna do it right. I mean, a lot of folks have mentioned today, if you're gonna do it right. Dong Su talked about it. A lot of folks prior in multiple conversations today said, well, if you're gonna do VC, do it right. And so their goal was, his vision was, hey, let's start a VC financial return focused fund. We're gonna hire local talent from attract local, well-networked Silicon Valley VCs who would be considered insiders, who would focus on financial return first. And the genesis of that idea was, if you follow the money, the market will tell you what's going well. Instead of taking a Panasonic approach to where the markets are, we're gonna take a market-oriented approach first. And the markets, if you invest in the best startups, that's where the money is, and that's where you're gonna find the best returns. And so that's what we did. So I convinced my partner, Paul, who was at Kleiner Perkins at the time, again, another well-known firm on Sand Hill Road that invested in Google and Amazon. And if you don't know, Paul and I used to be roommates, so we're very close, we're like brothers. And I told him, you should join, we'll do this together, it'll be a lot of fun, we'll create our own firm. And he's like, I don't want to work for a Japanese company. And I said, okay, we're not working for a Japanese company. We're going to be creating an independent company, independent firm, GPLP structure, venture economics, build our own team, and that's what we do.
A lot of comments to follow up and share with you kind of inside baseball, because I've known Carey since his IVP days. Well, first of all, the fact that actually I didn't even know Carey was going to talk about his own effort to start a venture fund that actually did not work. We talked extensively during that period, because Carey came out with a great track record from Intel, good reputation. I knew his partner well, and yet, sometimes timing also matters. And the fact that, again, we're in a forum that we're being brutally honest. We're not going to just do the commercials of how great we are and how well we've succeeded. We're actually talking about some of the failures that we had, which I think is refreshing. The second thought that I had is, because I knew this Panasonic Venture guys from very early on. This was a similar time when Sony was starting their efforts, Samsung, Panasonic, everybody was starting together. And very similar 1.0 model that Carey just talked about. Business unit, validation first, driven by strategic opportunities. And I'll tell you, when I was at Samsung Ventures, I co-invested in one company. Actually, that was the deal that Dong-Soo and I worked together on, representing Samsung. Co-invested with Panasonic, and that company ultimately failed completely. Zero, big donut. So again, not to say that that's going to happen all the time when you pursue strategic value, but despite all the promise of this magnificent wireless video transportation technology that we were investing in, if the company fails, there's no strategic value whatsoever. So again, theme of the day, strategic value is zero unless the company becomes successful. And so I think what the model of 3.0 really represents is, as Carey put it really well, despite any of the corporates, including Panasonic or Sony or TDK or Samsung, whoever that is, it's very difficult for a single corporation to understand where the market's going to end up. And that's why you have product launch failures and services that don't work, despite all of these big companies putting a lot of effort into it. And to flip that around, as Carey said, when you invest in companies that become successful, guess what? There will be strategic connections that you can find. Because when these companies become, the Twitters and the Netflix and the Facebooks and all of these Amazons of the world, then there's so much value that you can derive from that. And guess what? Because you were an early investor, you will get early access and insider connections to forge those partnerships for your competitors, right? And so I think that's something that really is important to take away. And I think it's only been in the last few years that the corporate VCs are now starting to think about it that way. One of the reasons that I left Samsung Ventures myself to launch Translink Capital was I felt that the very best companies that I was super excited to invest in, they actually could say no to me, right? And number one, these are the best companies that don't need any additional funding sources. They're very well backed by the top tier financial investors. Number two, our business unit didn't have an alternative, so we have no leverage to play one vendor off another. And because of those opportunities, they were concerned that if they took money from Samsung affiliated money, then, oh, but we have to do business with Sony and Panasonic and LG, that they said no. And so that ultimate king of the hill company, right? If you, because you're labeled Samsung Ventures or LG or anything, if they ultimately walk away from you because of that concern, because they're not neutral enough, then the model of 3.0 actually is something to think about.
So I think that's an interesting point, Jay. So the reason why we're called Conductive Ventures, and I've met so many people here, they're like, what is Conductive Ventures? The reason why we did that was, I said to the executive team at Panasonic, look, if you want us to go find a smart rice cooker for you or a smart shaver deal, we should be called Panasonic Ventures. But if you want to find deals that have nothing to do with Panasonic, that are going to help you understand what are the platform shifts in the next 7 to 10 years, then we should not call ourselves Panasonic Ventures. The reason is because people in the US still think Panasonic sells TVs in North America. So when you brand your venture fund with the parent corporate name, The entrepreneurs decide if they should come to you or not, whether or not they even know what the parent still does or what the parent is planning to do. So we never lead with the fact that Panasonic is our largest and biggest LP in our fund. That's number one. Point number two is we also don't promise any strategic benefit to the portfolio company or to the parent. We do best efforts. So I'm not one of the, I'm not trying to say we're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to Z, because I just don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And in our experiment, one of the things that I realized was in Fund 1, we had to deliver financial return. I still remember the meeting I had with the CFO of Panasonic. He said, Carey-san, please don't lose my money. That was his biggest concern. It wasn't, please make me a ton of money. It was, please don't lose my money.
That was a low bar to start out with. Thanks to
So-
your predecessor.
That was the CFO. I was like, gosh, Panasonic must spend way more than $100 million on toilet paper a year. Okay, so this, I was like, this can't be that hard. So it was just that message told me, look, we have a lot of ways, a lot of room to grow. Fund 1 now is a 3.2x. We delivered over $50 million of return last year from 4 IPOs and 3 M&A. Really, really positive. Biggest smile I've ever seen on the CFO's face. He's like, please give me a call when you're going to impact our earnings next time. I was like, yeah, like I have control over when that stuff happens. But it was a real sight to see, and I think we came full circle in the organization, and being able to return $50 million in cash was sort of the last checkbox, right? I mean, write-ups are great, up rounds are great, but cash return is what really counts at the end.
That's the only thing that the CFO counts.
Exactly. And I think what happens is when we deliver on financial return, it then gives us the right to deliver on all the other fun strategic stuff. Can we do corporate introductions? Can we do market trends, insights? All of those things I think come later. And one of the things we often say when we meet with all the different business unit heads is, and I hate to pick on Honda, love Honda, own Hondas my whole life. Honda Accord is my first car. Honda Accord is a phenomenal vehicle. It gets better gas mileage each year. It gets roomier, more luxurious. Hybrid version comes out. But the problem is, if you ask the Honda CEO 15 years ago, who was your biggest competitor? He'd probably say, oh, Nissan, Toyota, GM, Volkswagen. It's my competitors. But if you looked at mobility as a whole, he probably didn't know Uber, and more importantly, Apple. Because it's like, what does a smartphone have to do with, I build cars, we sell cars. Why would a smartphone kill my business? And the simple fact is that with the smartphone and geolocation, a mobility service like Uber could be built on top of that platform, which would then significantly impact Honda's core business. And so these platform shifts don't necessarily just come in front of you. They come on the sides, in the back, every single direction. And when you're running a business unit, you're so focused on delivering 90-day sprints, 1-year sprints. But who's looking for 7 to 10 years out? Nobody. That's the simple answer. And I think that when you do venture, that's what you're looking for. What's coming next in the 7 to 10-year time horizon?
That's fantastic. I mean, I do think that it's really interesting that the 3.0 corporate ventures that include Conductive, that include Sapphire Ventures, formerly known as S&P Ventures, GV, formerly known as Google Ventures, etc., have built a reputation of actually being some of the top performing financial funds in the industry. And because of that status and reputation, the best companies are coming to them. There's no filtering, there's no, oh, but I'm worried about, oh, but I want to do business with Sony too, so I can't go to a Panasonic backed fund. And all of that goes away. So I think it's something that is worth thinking about. The second comment I'll make is, however, the reason that I think a lot of these 3.0 companies happened was they were in the venture business long enough to learn for themselves what the limitations were by having that brand affiliation. And I think then and only then were they able to evolve to the next level.
I would have a
Hold on.
question, if I may.
No, I'm going to get in trouble if we don't have a mic for you in the translation.
So while the mic runner is running,
Go ahead.
I will just say, just on that point, Jay, the biggest benefit, and something that Nicholas mentioned, was readiness or timing. We benefited from the fact that Panasonic, for over 20 years, had tried the 1.0 version, and they just said, we're going to stop it. And so that enabled us and gave us the opportunity to come in with not only a 2, but what Jay calls the 3.0 version. If Panasonic had not had the learnings of 20 years, I don't think there would be a Conductive Ventures today. And I know this because we often talk to a lot of Japanese corporations who are dumbfounded that Panasonic, a very 100-year-old Japanese conglomerate, trusted 2 Taiwanese immigrants who don't speak Japanese. Skoshi oneshimasu.
They're taking lessons. They're taking lessons.
And we've built a brand new business. I mean, I always say, I joke with the CFO, how many microwaves do you have to sell at your margin to make what we've delivered to you in 5 years?
That's harsh.
It's like, no response. I don't think he understood it was a joke. Sorry.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to challenge you on one thing, and this is the value also a corporate can bring to a startup. I can tell you what we would typically ask a company. We would ask the company, why do you come to us? And we would ask, why do you not go to a financial investor? Is there anything we can do to help you to grow the company? And only if we get a sophisticated answer on this question, we would embark. So I would agree with you. If it's just like to limit the growth of the company, I would say stay away. But I think this is the question we as corporates needs to ask. Is there anything special we can do to you what a purely financial investor could not do?
Right. And allow me to be super clear on this. We're not bashing the 2.0 model whatsoever. Every corporate VC goes back to the objective of what they're trying to achieve, right? But to Carey's point, they tried with the 1.0 and 2.0 model. And because of that, doing the same thing, again, definition of madness, that's why they wanted to try something different. And as you can see, the results so far are excellent. Now, there's going to be challenges, and this is what we want to talk about in the remaining time. The question is, not every CEO or CFO is going to have that response. And what all of us, I think, in the corporate venture community have experienced is when you have a CEO change, when you have a CFO change, a CSO change, they come in and they look at everything. And of course, venture is like a tiny, tiny piece of their agenda, but they take a look. And for some people, they may not even care about the $50 million, right? And they're going to ask, what's the strategic value we're getting out of this? Look at my competitor like Sony and TDK and other guys. They're building these massive ecosystems under the corporate. How are you going to match that? Are we going to do things? So my question to you, Carey, is how sustainable is this approach? Because to me, that's the biggest concern. If you start flip-flopping at some point, then that's going to further damage the mothership, and it's not going to help you guys.
Yeah, so maybe, at this point, it's a phenomenal time. Paul and I are thinking, what's the 4.0? And I think we're trying to figure out as well. We evolved. The great thing, we have 5 people on our team. I highly respect how many people most of the CVC's firms have. So many people, I'm like, oh, I'd love to have all that resource. But we're a small team, we have 5 people. We think of ourselves as more of a SEAL team. Every individual operator on our SEAL team is highly expertise in what they do. We don't want an army. I think both Paul and I have done that. Into Capital, as an example, we don't manage an army. Yeah, we don't want an army. What we're thinking about as we kind of evolve to the 4.0 model is, what are the key strategic benefits? Because you're right. At the end of the day, and last week we had a wonderful time spending time with all the key executives at Panasonic, both here in Tokyo and Osaka. And we were like, hey, look, so what, right? I mean, that's often a question we get. So what if we deliver a 3x or a 2x? Financially, that's great. However, it's sort of capital plus. And how we define plus for us, and we've been ideating on this a lot, is what differentiated value can we bring to the business units that they don't get today, such as insights into Silicon Valley. What types of deep connections can we really provide? And we really want to think about it in a conductive way. We don't want to just necessarily copy and paste what other firms do, but we want to do something that's truly authentic, that we can put our logo behind, and that we can stand proudly like, hey, we delivered this, and we think it's a tremendous value. But I think it goes both ways. You know, just like in politics, I think a third of the business units are really receptive to startups in Silicon Valley. A third are like, hey, I'm kind of busy right now, so why don't you talk to me in 3 years? And then the other third are like, okay, like maybe we'll try, you know, like tell me more, okay? So we want to basically definitely work with the 1/3 we can get real proofs of concepts going, and that we could say, go to the next third, the maybes, the 1/3, proving them that, hey, this delivered real value. Don't you want to be like these cool kids, these cool business units who are innovative, who are thinking about what's next, and then we can win the 2/3. And then the other third, I'm assuming, will retire because no one fires anybody in Japan. So that's what I think happens.
On that note, if you could join me in thanking Carey for sharing his
Really wonderful, fantastic to hear, Carey. And Jay, as always, you bring out the best of your interviewees. So, actually we see a number of groups mentioned Sapphire, having that sort of 3.0 approach, but also they're aligning it with, say, SAP.io, which is more the CBC 2.0. So we've seen a lot of corporates actually taking a multiplicity of views. So I think it's really interesting to see that change happening. Now, I've got the great pleasure of introducing to the stage